here. I anticipate we may have some people coming in last minute, but thank you everyone for being here. So we are just going to start through our agenda, and I'm going to start with our opening prayer, our land acknowledgement, and then we're going to go into our commissioning. So if everybody will join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We come together in hope from different groups, answering the same call to service, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in gratitude for the trust placed in us, for the opportunity to serve, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in respect, aware of our diversity, willing to work for the good, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in awe of the wonder and beauty of each of God's children, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in God's name, and as we work together toward the same goal, each piece of the puzzle begins to fit neatly into place, creating a breathtaking picture of love, compassion, courage, and grace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Alton, as we know it today,
is rich in the history and modern traditions
of many First Nations and the Métis,
from the lands of the Anishinaabe
to the Attawandaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lake
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters
to honor and respect the four directions: lands,
waters, plants, animals, and ancestors
that walked before us.
All these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God. We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
Invitation to prayer. God, the source of every good gift, you have called us together as servants to do your will. Grant us the light of your Spirit to guide us in our responsibilities as members of SEAC. We make our prayer through Jesus Christ, the light of the world, who lives forever and ever. Amen.
Commissioning of SEAC members. Word of God. A reading from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. Now there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one is given through Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit. To another the gifts of healing by one Spirit, to another the work of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the discernment of spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, and to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are activated by one and the same Spirit, who allots to each one individually just as the Spirit chooses. The word of the Lord.
God has called us to serve the students of Halton Catholic District School Board. Together we pray. May we work together in harmony for the common good. May we listen to one another in a spirit of genuine respect.
May we encourage and reverence one another's unique talents. May we use the gifts of the Spirit in creative Christian leadership. May we approach our decision-making through discernment and prayer. And may we respond effectively to the needs of the children in our care. To item 1.2, we have the approval of the agenda. So everybody will have been provided a copy of the agenda in their meeting package for this evening. Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything about the agenda? No? Okay, so if I could get someone to move the agenda.
I'll move it.
Okay, thank you. So moved by Trish. And seconder?
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Moved. Okay, so thank you, everybody. As I said, welcome back. There are coffee and cookies for anyone that might need a little something to get you through the meeting. We're really excited to have a number of presentations here this evening that we will get to shortly. It's great to see everybody around the table again. Hopefully you've all had a wonderful summer and looking forward to a great year as we regather as SEAC members. We are going to be following up as well with a number of items throughout the year, just to make sure that people have the resources that they need and the supports that they need. So we'll be making sure that we circulate any things that members might need to help them get through effective meetings. So anyways, I look forward to a really great year. We have a new superintendent that is joining us, that is here this evening. So I think it's going to be wonderful. Do you want to take a few minutes to intro?
I was saving it for my superintendent report, but hi everyone. So Cassandra Jack Caldera, really fortunate to be superintendent of special education services here at Halton Catholic District. Started August 1st. I made a comment earlier that August 1st is definitely different than September 1st. So you definitely feel the difference when the schools are open, and I just feel really blessed to be a part of the community. I have a great team that I've been able to work with, and I'm learning a lot. And thank you, Brenda, for welcoming me. It's funny to see you in this capacity because she was on my interview panel, but now we're just, we're working together doing the thing. So I'm really thankful to be here, and I'm prepared to do the learning along with you and to support you in what you need. So.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 2, which is declarations of conflict of interest. Do we have any conflicts of interest this evening? No? Okay, perfect. So moving right into our presentations. Our first presentation this evening is on the student census. And I want to welcome Nick Lombardo and Dr. Lisa Collymore. So come on up.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting us to present the student census information to you tonight. As Trustee Agnew has said, I'm Dr. Lisa Collymore, and this is my teammate, Dr. Nick Lombardo, and we are part of the research team here at Halton Catholic. So to start, next slide, please, Nikki. I'll just give you a little background about what the student census was and sort of the purpose and our method very briefly, and then I'll turn things over to Nick. So we were mandated as a board to collect identity-based data for our student population and also our workforce population. So this study or this collection really captures the student identities in our system from K all the way to grade 12. And we were provided with guidance from the Equity Secretariat on how to do this. So it was a very prescribed collection. And there were a set of data standards that we had to learn and had to follow for the collection. And so there are a lot of rules behind the collection. So it's unlike any other collection that we've done in the past in the board. And in fact, Nick and I are the only holders of the raw information for the board. Everything else, what we share is what we can share publicly. So with respect to the background or the planning of the census, so this has been taking place for a number of years now. Before we actually did the collection, we did a pilot study to make sure we worked out all the kinks. We tested out the questions on the students in various grades. And then in the fall and then in the spring of 2022, we actually administered the census throughout our system. And so you may recall that parents of K to 8 students filled out the census with or on behalf of their child, whereas our secondary panel, our grades 9 to 12, filled it out by themselves. Now we did all the things. We got permission where we needed to get permission. The students that did not receive permission did not see the census questions for the secondary panel. And then We took a bit of time to sort of collate all of the data that we got back. And then we started sort of presenting our findings in about the end of March of 2022. So we sent the survey links out to all of the students in our system. And essentially we heard back from about 5,370 elementary students or parents and about 4,987 secondary students. So not as many as we were hoping for our first go around, but we did do a lot of communication and a lot of promotion around the census in terms of its importance. And we're really proud of the numbers that we did get. We feel as a team here, we feel like these are good numbers as our first go of this collection. And so we have been able to summarize it at the best as we can. And like I said, the full reports are available on our public website. And what we're going to be presenting to you today is really just a snapshot of the results, focusing specifically on the students who identified as having a disability. So I'm going to throw it over to Nick.
All right, thank you, Lisa. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. I'm going to present the findings from our census in essentially three parts. The first is just a sort of description of who our students are, focusing on our students who identify as having disabilities. Then I'll turn to looking at difference in their perceptions of school, and then we'll talk about student achievement at school. So as you see on this slide, and as Lisa mentioned, we asked over 5,000 respondents whether or not they identified or whether or not their children identified as having a disability. And you can see about 5% of respondents in our elementary panel said, yes, my child identifies as having a disability. 1.5% were unsure. Of those respondents who said, yes, my child identifies as having a disability, we said, which types of disabilities does your child have? And here respondents were able to answer and choose more than one option. So if you see on the chart on the right-hand side, you see that it's broken down. 246 respondents answered this question. We see the largest single type of disability was learning disabilities at just under 50%, followed by autism spectrum disorder at just under 30%, followed by developmental disabilities, mental health disabilities, and then ADHD, speech impairment, physical disabilities. And then I'd like to also draw your attention to additional disabilities. So suppression rules meant that any times we had fewer than 15 respondents for a single choice, we had to put them all together to ensure privacy. So you'll see that's what's included in additional disabilities. So this is the count for parent respondents of elementary students. On the next slide, we will see the secondary respondents. Oh, you just got to close out of that one. It's okay. Thank you. So our secondary students, as Lisa mentioned, answered the question for themselves. And we had, just pull it up here, we had 7.5% of our secondary students answered, yes, I identify as somebody with a disability. 6.9% said they were unsure. Of those students who said, yes, I do have a disability, mental health disabilities at 50.4% were the #1 chosen disability. This was followed by learning disabilities at 43.8% and autism spectrum disorder at 13.3%. This was followed by addictions, deaf or hard of hearing, ADHD, physical disabilities, pain, developmental disabilities, speech impairment, and then additional disabilities make up around 16%. So you can see there's quite a difference between elementary and secondary respondents. So we collected all this data on who our students with disabilities were, but we also asked questions about their perceptions of school. So as part of the student census, they were asked a variety of questions about how they felt at school. And what we did was we took this information about who our students with disabilities were, and we cross-tabulated that with these information to get a better sense of how our students with disabilities were feeling about school. So on the next slide, I will show you our cross-tabulations. And the way this works is green is our board total. A blue colored number means that it is more negative than the board total, and an orange means that it's more positive. So essentially, orange is good, blue is not so good. And what we did is we cross-tabulated our students' identities, and here we're focusing just on those with disabilities. And so every parent was asked, does your child see their identity positively reflected at school? And secondary students were asked if their own identity was positively reflected at school. And we can see when we look at this that, for instance, our elementary school total, almost 90% see their identities positively reflected in school. For students with disabilities, it's only 83.5%. Compare that to students with disabilities at 90.2%. So our students without disabilities in our elementary schools are seeing themselves identified positively more so than their counterparts with disabilities. And similarly, in the secondary panel, 74 students overall, rather 74% of students overall, see themselves positively reflected at school. And this compares to just 58.4% of students with disabilities and 76.4% without. So I'm not going to get into all the numbers individually here, because really what matters when we look at this is the kind of pattern that we're seeing. So if we go to the next slide, I'll read through the questions, but I want to point out the patterns that we see here, which is a consistent pattern of our students with disabilities having more negative outcomes than those without disabilities. So we asked how students felt in terms of safety at school. And again, we see that overall it's quite positive for our board, but for elementary students with disability, it's about 15 or more than 15 percentage points lower than the board overall. And similarly, we see similar numbers in secondary panel. We asked how connected students feel to staff at school. And we see actually a little bit of a different pattern here, with overall about 70% of elementary students feeling quite to extremely connected to staff at school, with just a small drop for those students with disabilities. But when we look at secondary, we see that our students with disabilities are actually feel more connected to staff at school than students without. And this was something we heard from feedback from students as well, that they did feel connected, in particular to spec ed staff at schools. If we go to the next slide, we see that, again, this pattern overall continues. We asked how connected students felt to other students at school. And we do see a quite significant difference here, with just 42.4% of students with disabilities feeling quite to extremely connected to other students at school. And so these numbers I think are quite, they can be quite shocking when we look at them in this way. These are big drops. And so we can see these differences as a pattern throughout. We see the same thing for secondary students, with just 42.3% of students with disabilities. And when we asked whether or not they enjoy being at school, again, we see overall 94% for our elementary students, just 79% for our students with disabilities. And similarly, only 51.8% of secondary students with disabilities felt they enjoy being at school. On the next slide, we'll see about acceptance and belonging. So we see that again, this pattern continues. We see that our students with disabilities feel less accepted by staff at school than their counterparts. And when asked whether or not their child ever feels unwelcome at school, we see that a majority of respondents, so only 42.8% said their children were never unwelcome at school, compared to 76.4% of those overall. When we look at secondary students, we see that only 27.2% of secondary students never felt unwelcome at school, meaning that more than 70% of secondary students did feel unwelcome at school with disabilities. The next slide, again, is the end of that. But so we asked these perceptual questions, and so we can see these meaningful results that were statistically significant throughout. And part of our remit in carrying out the census was to link this data about student identity not just to perceptual data about schools, but also about student achievement. So as part of this, we carried out disproportionality analyses to link whether or not students had disabilities, as well as other identity markers, to their school achievement. And so what I'll show you on the next slide here is these disproportionality analyses. This is how we are required by the anti-racism data standards to report our disproportionalities. And I don't think they're the clearest thing to understand right off the bat. So basically what it is that any number means that it's exactly the proportion of students doing well as you would expect. If there are fewer than one, so for welcome. So basically, when we look at these charts here, we'll see that anything at 1 means exactly the proportion of students expected. If it is below 1, it is highlighted in blue, and that means there are fewer students doing well than we would expect given their proportion. So that means that if they're doing better, it's highlighted in orange and there's more. So again, orange good, blue not so good. But really what this is showing you is that whether or not students are meeting provincial standards, which for our report card grades mean they're getting a mark of 70 or above. And for EQAO, it means they're getting at least a level 3. So if we go to the next chart, I'll show you the first set of outcomes. We decided to link our findings from the student census to report card grades and EQAO results from the 2021-2022 school year. So it's the same students who took the census in the same year. When we looked at combined grades 1 through 8 English marks, we found that students with disabilities were underrepresented by about 0.2 in terms of meeting provincial standards. This means that fewer students with disabilities were meeting provincial standards than we would expect given their percentage in the population. We found that students without disabilities, by contrast, were basically meeting the threshold of right about 1. It was 1.01. When we dug down into EQAO results to get a sense of how this differed between school and EQAO results, we did not have enough students in grade 3 to show you that data, but we do for grade 6. And we found, again, this similar pattern. Our students with disabilities are underperforming. They're disproportionately below the percentage of those meeting provincial standards than we would expect. And this carries on into EQAO as well. So within EQAO reading, they are also disproportionately underrepresented in terms of meeting provincial standards. And students without disabilities are proportionately meeting the standards. If we go to the next page, we'll see a very similar pattern for math. Again, elementary math, grades 1 through 8. We see an even more significant difference with students 0.76, meaning that they're underperforming in terms of meeting provincial standards for math, and a very similar thing in grade 6, where it's 0.83 compared to their colleagues without disabilities at 1.01. When we turn to secondary on the next slide, we see this pattern continues. It's less so we see less of a disproportionality in secondary than we do in elementary. And we see that it's 0.93. Anything really over 10 is something that we would be is a sort of big meaningful number, but any difference here is still meaningful. So what we're looking at here is just it's less of a degree of disproportionality. We see in grade 10, when we link it to the OSSLT, we see the same pattern. Again, students with disabilities underrepresented in terms of meeting provincial standards on report card marks, and less so on OSSLT. Turning to the next page to grade 9 math. I should say grade 9, that's a typo, sorry. Grades 9 through 12, we see again a slight difference here, a slight disproportionality for students with disabilities not meeting provincial standards, and even more so when we look at grade 9 in particular with 0.76. For EQAO math, we're unable to show you because we have too few respondents. So that in total are our findings right now that we've presented. The total findings are available on the board website. with more information about our methods and analysis. So thank you.
Okay, questions? I got a list, so start. Yep, go ahead, Maria. No, go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions and I guess some observations that I'd like to share. Just wondering if do you have any data on students that identify?
We don't at the moment. This was not linked directly to IEP or gifted.
Right, but you did ask like if they had disability.
Yes, but we have the analysis has not yet linked.
Okay, but there was no question, right? If they, and I guess, so I'm trying to think about it, sort of phrase this the right way, but there's a couple things that I think of when I look at the results, and of course, like you want 100% of all students to feel safe, connected, well, but on the surface, I feel like there's not that much information to go on. When a student says they don't feel safe, what does that mean? Physically safe, mentally safe, like, what are the conditions that are making them feel safe? And I don't know how you address that without knowing what answers are. And just to give an example, like, both my parents have had mobility issues. My dad had a stroke, paralyzed on one side, in a wheelchair for 13 years. He could be surrounded, like, he could have two of my very strong brothers helping him transfer from the chair to the bed, and he never felt safe, right? So I think you need to understand, like, what's behind that in order to be able to address it. And if you can, how do those students feel outside of school? Do they just not feel safe at school? They maybe not ever feel safe anymore, right? So I think there's more digging that needs to be done. And I guess the other observation I would have, and again, of course, we want 100% of students to feel all these good, positive things. But when I look at the numbers, like, as you mentioned, the response rate wasn't as high as you would have liked, right? So in elementary, like, there was 5,370 students that applied or their parents applied on their behalf. And 4.9% identified as having a disability, which works out to 263 students. And when I do the math in secondary, it's 374. It's not really a large proportion of the population. And we know sometimes with surveys, the most dissatisfied people are the ones. So I just feel like you really need more, if it's possible to get more students to participate in some way to answer these questions, because I feel like we're making a lot, like, really big conclusions and wanting to take action without, I feel like it's a bit short. I just wanted to share that. Anything you want to say to that? Or it's not really a question, but.
So no, thanks for the feedback and the comments. I mean, whenever we do a collection, of course, we would like to hear from as many students as possible, as many families as possible, which is why we went on like that large sort of promotional tour in terms of reaching out to all the communities and working with strategic communications to ensure that the messages were clear. Ultimately, in a survey collection, you can't force anyone to participate. And we did leave it open longer than we had hoped. But I mean, like, it was open for a long time. And like I said, it was our first go around at the student census. So did we learn a few things that we can try differently for next time? 100%. And that's our goal. And this is just one piece of data that Spec Ed is using for their planning, for the planning for our students. So Nick and I have been meeting with Spec Ed since these were released. So we've been meeting with various groups. And the idea really is to dig deeper where we can dig deeper. If we do have more information to share, that will help answer some of those lingering or other questions that staff may have. And I will say that, like I said, we've only presented things here that we are allowed to present publicly. There is a lot of information that can be shared with those staff members who need it to perform their role. And those are sort of just stipulations that are required of us for this types of collection, because essentially the collection is for us to verify, assess, and monitor if there are systemic disparities and disproportionalities that exist at Halton Catholic. That is the goal of the collection. And yes, it's to share back with the prospective staff members so that they can help plan. So we have other methods that we can sort of rely on. So for example, you talk about, you gave the example of like the safety question, and we agree that there can certainly be additional questions that are added. And, we do have other collections that take place at the board that will hopefully help answer some of those questions. So for example, we just last year did a school climate survey, which used the similar questions that the census used with respect to safety. So there may be some more information that Spec Ed can gather from those types of questions. And like I said, those results are just sort of now starting to be rolled out to the system. And so as we dig deeper, like we have a meeting set up with Cassandra's group in the coming weeks that we plan to share that information, and hopefully they can gather some more information with respect to safety and students with disabilities from that data collection as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, it wasn't a criticism of the process, and I know it was the first time, and there was some trepidation about this census. It's different from other, and not being anonymous, even though it's confidential, all that. So it wasn't a criticism at all. I'm just saying, like, in terms of interpreting it and moving forward, I think, I'm a numbers person, so that's kind of where I look. So I just wanted to share that.
One thing too, we did do robust statistical testing on it. The numbers that we're presenting here are about 3% margin of error, so plus or minus 3%. And obviously with the smaller numbers of students with disabilities, that margin grows. But yeah, we were quite confident of that margin overall. We also did testing to ensure that it wasn't one school being overrepresented or one part of Halton being overrepresented, that kind of thing, but absolutely. Thank you.
Is there other questions before I say? So I can't. Not at this time, Brianna. Just happy to have you here, but at this point until the motion is, yeah. So, but next meeting you can have at it. Is there a question, Maria?
Well,
She's here as an observer this evening.
Oh, was she not appointed by the board in September?
Yeah, but it doesn't until we do it here.
That's not my understanding of the act. It's the board that appoints.
We can find clarity on that. That's my understanding, and that's the direction I've been given.
Yeah,
just continue. We can. Yes. So I do have a question. I just wanted to, and Maria brought it up, just ask a question about the criteria that was utilized. So this was not about exceptionalities, correct? This was about disabilities, right? I don't know that, I know that gifted is not identified as a disability. Is that correct? Okay, so that wouldn't have been part of this because it doesn't fall under that category, correct? Okay. So Nick, this is not the first time, as Lisa, that my feedback on this. The first time I saw these numbers, I was actually quite visibly upset about it. And recognizing that we have a lot of work to do. And I know that you had said that it's shocking, and I'm not sure there's a question in here. There might be at some point, but I know you said it was shocking, but I can tell you probably not just anecdotally that it's probably not shocking to a number of parents and students who have felt like this for a number of years. I'm grateful we have the data to support this now, but I can tell you that this just, I think, proves, if you will, I'm not using the right term here, but some of what parents and students have been feeling and experiencing for a number of years. So I'm grateful again that we have the data to support what's been said and felt for a very long time. And I know that you can't answer this, but I think it would be important to understand, and I'm going to put probably our SO and our director on a little bit of the hot seat, but moving forward, like what happens now? I know there's data that's going to be shared with staff, but I think this is a big deal. It might only be 200 to 300 students. To me, that's 200 to 300 that are too many, especially when they're students who do have disabilities. And a lot of these students are very vulnerable. They're not verbal. They're not able to express how they're feeling in certain ways. So I actually think that might be why you don't have the participation that you have. So I actually think it is very concerning. Is what happens next? Like, what are the plans and the programs and the strategies that we are going to look to improve these numbers, because they're not okay the way they are, and they're actually quite upsetting and disheartening, if I'm being honest. So I'd love to know what comes next with the data that's been collected.
Thank you. As both the researchers have shared, that this is information that I am inheriting. I'm going to be looking over this information with some teams, and then we want to be able to respond in meaningful ways to what the emerging trends are and what the needs are. Part of my role this year is to better really understand. And I have to say, although the results are not ideal, this kind of opportunity to get this kind of research coming from different board experience is unique to Halton Catholic. This is not information that is readily available to all of our school boards. So I do thank you for sharing that information and for making it available to us. But it will inform our next steps, our planning. What we need to do is to ensure that we're listening to the voices that we do have and the parents who have spoken on behalf of those students. That's going to drive what our next steps are. We've got some good news stories as far as some of our interventions for literacy, numeracy. So we know that that is an area that we want to continue to push the positive work that we're doing. But as far as identifying very specific and attainable goals, that's the work that we're going to be focusing on this year. So I don't, we have some meetings lined up actually, so I don't have the breakdown of all the information that the data is sharing with us, but that was what we wanted to identify as a starting point for where we go to support students, elementary, high school, with those exceptionalities.
And so I would say as part of that process, respectfully, and this hasn't, I've never been quiet about this, but you know, we can't do anything about us without us. And I would ask that while educators do what educators do, because that's what you do, unless you parent a child with a disability or you live with a disability, it is actually impossible to determine what is going to make this better. So I would ask that when you're doing this work, that you are having meaningful, intentional engagement with the students and the families who are directly impacted by this, and they will tell you what you need to hear. They will tell you the ways in which things can be improved and the methods and mechanisms that can happen. Because again, as well-intentioned as someone might be sitting around a table, you're not able to determine how a child is going to feel safer or a sense of belonging or a sense of participation. So I would just plead with you that you work that into part of your planning, your strategy, and your implementation and execution, because you can't do it without that. And I think the lack of that is going to not fix this. So I challenge the team with that. And this committee is always available to you for whatever you might need as you go through this process. So please utilize us in any way possible.
And we're not shying away from the data, and that's why we thought it would be really important to start the conversation here. So to your point, we definitely wouldn't be able to move this work forward without your voices and for your valuable input. Many of those voices are your voices reflected in the data. So, like I said, we're not hiding the results, and we wanted to make sure that you were aware so that we can be part of the push in the right direction.
Thank you. Is there any, yeah, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jody, that's fine.
Hi, I just wanted to just add a little something to what you were saying, Brenda, about, hearing the student voice and the parent voice. So I know Cassandra, as she spoke, it is the work moving forward, and certainly some of the data is new to me tonight, this evening as well. So we're still hearing it, listening to it, but meeting and doing all of that. But based off some of the data that was shared last year, we have started working with our equity and inclusion group, working on a campaign, and Denise has been working with us as well. And we have been in schools, meeting with kids and talking about their experiences and getting to learn and understand, do they feel safe? What are some things we can do different? And then we have another focus group coming up. So we are starting that work. But I just wanted to sort of say we're on that, and we know and we really hear you, because I've been on this for the last 3 years, so we understand, and we will reach out to parents as well, and know you guys are here for support. But I just wanted to share that little bit. So while the work is brand new and Cassandra's taking that lead moving forward, we have started a little bit.
Mandy, you had a question?
Hi, so I just have a comment. I represent Halton Down Syndrome Association on this board, and I saw an opportunity when I saw the submerged numbers, so the ones you couldn't share. So to me, I read it that there were less than 15 students with Down syndrome that filled out the survey, or whose parents did, because it couldn't be shown in its own category. And I happen to know we have over 150 members. So the opportunity there, perhaps in the next go around, is marketing directly to maybe some of the organizations that represent the different disabilities. And I'm thinking now it's very eye-opening, and I really appreciate that I could see personally the results that you received, and in future what you're going to be able to do with them. So if there's a marketing campaign that really is able to say, have your voice, and you're able to say, this is what we found out, there's this many people, for example, with disabilities, we believe living in Halton, have your say. Something maybe a little more specific than representatives like some of ourselves could go back to our organizations. And I certainly would push my group through our own marketing avenues and newsletters to get them to fill out the newsletter. Because I think there's a lot of value to be had when you have, even more numbers from those different disabilities and different groups of people. So I'm just thinking about the opportunity for the future. So thank you so much for sharing what you did.
And that's a really good point, Mandy. And I think that anybody who tries to do anything with engagement or they know it's a struggle. And so I think that's a great idea, is sometimes, again, we can be a conduit to sometimes communicate that information out to some of these groups if you're, a parent and an HCDSB person. So that's a great idea. So thank you for that. Is there any other questions, comments? No? Okay. Well, we look forward to the next steps. We look forward to updates. And again, very, very appreciative that you come in and share this information with us. And like I said, we look forward to the next steps. So thanks so much to both of you. Yep, Maria.
Sorry, just before we move on, I just wanted to get some clarification on what the process is before a new member can speak, because this is really different from what we've experienced over the last 9 years.
The last part of what you said.
Well, this is very unusual. I have been here 9 years and have never experienced this, and it doesn't seem to be consistent with the legislation. So just trying.
Do you have the legislation there?
I do, yeah.
Do you want to, if there's something there that we're missing, please let me know.
Well,
happy to admit if we've made an error. Absolutely.
Well, it's so associations nominate members, right? And then they're appointed by the board. There's no authority. SEAC doesn't have any authority really to do anything, including appointing members. So just trying to understand.
So the process when we looked into it, the process that we were informed of was that it goes to the board for approval, which it has. The first meeting, the individual that has been approved will sit as an observer, and then they will participate in the next meeting once the motion has come to SEAC at that meeting that they're at.
Okay, and sorry, where did this process come from?
We invest. Do you have? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry.
And again,
it's this opportunity and this partnership was something that we had received some information around kind of as we started the beginning of the school year. So maybe unfamiliar might be the term that I would use to kind of describe this situation, but we are not anything but hoping to be compliant. So Margaret's going to look into finding out whether or not we've misinterpreted what information we had received. So.
Go ahead, Brianna. Yeah.
Share that the information that I did receive from Autism Ontario was if I was not approved by the board, if the board didn't have a meeting before our first meeting, I had to be an observer and I was not allowed to ask questions. But once I was approved by the board, that I was allowed. So maybe again, if that's not the case, maybe we share that with the association as well. Just
for sure. And again, I think there's always an element of human error, and I understand the need to, have to clarify that. And
no, I'm just hearing the conversation, so
absolutely.
I just kind of wanted to jump in here and
for sure
speak for myself as well.
Absolutely. And, I think if you ever heard our SEAC, we were very excited to have a representative from Autism Ontario again join us. So certainly looking forward to the conversation and participation. So if there has been an error on our part, and if that's the direction you've been given, Brianna, then I'm happy to have you participate. It's not about being, right. If that's what you have been told and our information that we have been informed of for the process is incorrect, then happy to have you participate. So that's not a problem whatsoever. So, and, with respect to the presentation that was just done, sorry if you missed the chance to ask a question, but by all means, if you want to email either Nick or Lisa, I would absolutely encourage you to do that. And they can answer any of the questions that you may have had. Okay, of course, no problem.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Can I
Yes.
just ask, sorry, if someone is not on the board yet, is it appropriate for them to be sitting at the board table, or should they sit in the gallery if they're an observer?
So they were, so I didn't want to actually go up and ask Brianna to move. So yes, that would be the practice, Trustee Saunders, but I actually didn't want to go ahead and do that. Brianna was at the table, happy to have her there, and just rolled with it. Questions on this? Happy to continue to discuss it. Great. I also missed welcoming Margaret Heath initially, so welcome. I know you're at our last meeting of last year, but this is your first official meeting in that capacity. So welcome. For anyone that's not aware, Margaret is a huge source of support and information and resources, and we're very, very grateful to have her here. So thank you very much, Margaret. Okay, moving along to our second presentation. I just grab a sheet here. You guys are already like ready to go. So we have Special Education Summer Learning Program. I've got Diana Comito here and your team. And we had the privilege of hearing this presentation at our board table, and it was a wonderful presentation. And so I'm very grateful to have you come and present this to our SEAC this evening.
Thanks so much for welcoming us here and allowing us the opportunity to share with you some of the work we did this past summer. I'm fortunate to be joined by most of my team here this evening. Colleen Verardo served as our special education coordinator this summer, and two of our classroom teachers, Amy Fitzgerald and Lauren Payton. And you'll get a chance to hear from each of them over the course of the presentation. So our summer learning program provided about 25 or so students the opportunity to be part of an incredible learning experience that combined literacy and numeracy with social and communication skills. We had 3 different classes, like I mentioned. We had an essential skills class, a structured teaching class that catered to students in grades 4 to 8, and a life skills class catering to our high school population. In addition to the 4 of us. There was another teacher, 13 educational assistants, a child and youth counselor, a behavior analyst, and a CDA. Staff and students quickly became a family and enjoyed many learning and social experiences together. I'll pass it off to Colleen. A little bit about the essential skills class.
The essential skills class was taught by Lindsay Tarba, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. The essential skills class is for students that are in grades 4 to 8, and they work on Ontario curriculum. It's just at various grade levels, so they're not necessarily working at their appropriate grade level. They're usually working 1 to 2 years below that. The main focus is literacy and numeracy with a growth mindset focus. We're trying to get these students to find their love for literacy and numeracy. And through hands-on experiential learning, the students build the confidence and academic skills, and of course, they work on their social and friendship skills as well.
Amy will share about the structured teaching class.
Hi. So I ran the structured teaching class. I had students 4 to 8. Our class started off small and slowly grew throughout the time. So we really focused on, first of all, structure. So routine, when the kids came in every morning, taking full advantage of technology and having our schedule on the board. The kids knew every day. We would have literacy blocks, numeracy blocks that focused on functional skills. And then we also embedded hands-on learning that fell along with those 2 things. And then also we were very blessed over the summer to have a lot of extra presentations, guest speakers who came in, and thankfully to these 2, especially with the structured teaching and trying to keep things consistent and getting the kids used to a routine, I was very blessed that they made sure that those extra activities happened at the same time block so the kids knew what the schedule was each day. I had one friend who would always tell me what time it was if I was a minute, too long. And what we did this year was we did weekly themes. So our first week focused on the social emotional, understanding our emotions, relationship building, the kids getting to know each other. They became best friends instantly. It was lovely. Week 2, we focused on like nature and understanding our world and creation. And then our third week, we focused on all different types of procedures. So the kids, through the functional math, the literacy, those activities, we would learn things together. We would do things together. They would interact with one another. And it was just really nice to see them grow. And, the first presentation presentation with data. That was really eye-opening to myself as well. And I'd be curious to see what parents may have said after the kids were part of this program, because seeing just how happy and excited they were every day to come, I think it was really beneficial. So yeah, I saw some really great things in there and the kids had a great time. So I did the life skills class. This is actually my second year. I think the nicest thing for me to see was how many students returned back from last year to this year. And it was almost like we never left. So that really warmed my heart. And some of my new kiddos that came in, it took a couple of days for them to get into that routine. But very similar to the other class, we had established routines right away. We focused on functional literacy, functional numeracy, putting together a grocery list, maybe creating a budget. And again, depending on their levels, I had some students who were really advanced and some who I had to really scale back. But no matter what, we were doing it together as a class. And we ensured that we did a lot of group activities as well, too, because focusing on, grade 9, 10, 11, 12 plus, I really wanted them to also think about, opportunities to collaborate with each other, to have those social skills. I gave them opportunities as much as possible to voice their opinions and have those conversations with each other. So much so that near the end, they started talking to the adults as well, too. They would ask us questions. So it wasn't just about facilitating discussions with them, but they wanted to ask questions of us, too. So it was really beautiful to see. And we also had opportunities to go outside of the school as well, too, and practice safety in the community as well, which is super important. So it was beautiful. It's such a beautiful program, and I hope I get to be a part of it again next year. I really do.
As do we. I'll turn it over to Colleen again, and we'll alternate a little bit, just giving you a bit more detail and sort of an overview lens of the whole program.
And I just wanted to add to what Lauren said. This is my second year doing the program as well. Last year, I was the ESC teacher, and then this summer, I was able to do the coordinator position. And when you try to explain this program to people, it's really hard. So my best way to explain it is that it is a family that comes together from day one, and the love for each other just grows over time. And it was like Lauren said, to see so many of our friends come back this year, it kind of made you feel good that they enjoyed the program enough last year that they were attending this year. And hopefully maybe we'll see them again next summer. During the 3-week program, the staff led students through differentiated literacy and numeracy activities using creatively delivered lessons, hands-on activities, group work, and Osmos learning centers. There was no doubt by the conversation and excitement in the classrooms that the students were enjoying their learning. We were very fortunate to have our amazing CDA, Mel, deliver the Story Champs program to the students. Sessions to develop students' social and emotional skills were presented by Halton Women's Place. And we had Mr. Colhane, who is a teacher with our board. He volunteered his time during the summer to share his talents by leading the students in a STEAM activity.
We also brought in some additional folks from outside. We had Little Ray's Reptiles come visit, I think on the next slide there, yep. And they shared just some creatures that allowed our students to conquer their fears, and ours as well, I think. But and we had our CYC Ashley coordinated some therapy dog visits as well with therapy dogs. We also had she's an EA with our board, actually, Sharon Garrity, who's also a yoga instructor on the side. I worked with her several years ago and called in a favor, and she came and ran a couple yoga classes with our kiddos as well. We brought in X Movement. We had a fabulous energizer named Mars who motivated our kids while teaching them the importance of having a positive mindset and being kind to one another and embracing our differences. And then we were treated to the fabulous artist, Aiden Lee. He's a fabulous young man who willingly shares that he has ADHD, anxiety, and autism. He's a former Halton Catholic student and not only an incredible artist, but also a wonderful role model for our students.
One of the highlights for the students was celebrating their success at the summer learning program with a McDonald's pancake breakfast with their friends. This program was not only an amazing experience for the students, but the staff truly enjoyed their time there as well. The proof really is in the fact that this year we had several staff and students that were part of the program last year. There really are no words to describe the sense of belonging, love, and happiness that we all experienced, but we're hoping that this video will help to give you a glimpse of our amazing time with this program.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. Woo! With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Give me all you got, don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high, bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high, bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, it might seem crazy what I'm.
Not sure if there's any questions, but we're happy to take any.
Thank you so much. Just as good the second time as the first time. Is there any questions or comments from anybody on the presentation? Yeah, Trish, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. That was so cool to watch. Very peppy. Thank you for your energy and your time in this too. I have just two questions. Is this the second year that it's run? Okay, so it's only been 2 years. And then how are you determining who is eligible?
So I'll try, and then maybe Jody, you can chime in if I'm missing some details, but homeschool certs put forward students that would qualify to fit into each of those classes. So obviously through a conversation with parents, and then those names are put forward.
Yes, all parents receive information, and it's on the board website, so they know that the program's available to their child, and then they reach out to the school-based cert to ensure that it's the right program that we're putting them forward for, and then we kind of go through and then look at the staffing that we have, and we're able to usually accept everyone, so that's exciting too. But yeah, all parents get information about it, and then the certs put forward names of the student for the appropriate program.
That was my next question was, what was the number? Were you capped? Did you have to turn anyone away? Was it?
No, I think for the most part, we end up taking everyone. If I recall, this year we did end up taking, because I know we had hired a few more EAs and things like that. So yeah, I don't think there's any problem with the capacity in that way. Yeah. It was the same last year, same number of classes last year as it was this year. Yeah.
It's really encouraging. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Yeah, Mandy, go ahead.
I was just wondering, is it a full day, 5-day-a-week program? And is there a cost to families, or is it subsidized? How does that part work?
It was a half-day program, so mornings only, Monday to Friday for 3 weeks in July, starting right after Canada Day. No cost to parents, sorry. Yeah.
No other questions? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again for being here and thank you for all the work that you do. Diana, you know I'm a huge fan of this program and I wish we had the ability to expand it and offer it to more families, and maybe one day that will happen. But thank you again for the incredible opportunity that these students were able to have.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your support.
Okay, have a great night. Okay, so just moving on, we are moving to item 4, which is 4.1, the approval of the minutes from the June 12th SEAC meeting. Again, those will have been a part of your meeting package. So if there was any questions, comments, additions, deletions for the minutes? Okay, could I get a mover for the minutes of the June 12th, 2023 SEAC meeting?
I'll move it.
Great, thanks so much, Rick. And do we have a seconder?
Yep, I'll second.
Thanks, Trish. Okay. Item number 5.1 is summary of outstanding items from previous meetings. Again, that will have been in your board package. Was there any questions or comments at all on that? Okay. Great. So moving on to item number 6, which is 6.1, policy II-37, volunteers in Catholic schools. That will have been in your package, or there would have been a link to the policy. We can answer any questions that you may have. The policy, a little bit of back and forth. It was at the board table, went to the policy meeting, went back to the board table, policy meeting. It was supposed to come back to the board table, but it has gone out for stakeholder feedback, as it does impact a number of stakeholders in our system. And so part of that, when it goes out for feedback, we ensure that committees like SEAC and CPIC are formally identified as part of that process. And so is there, I don't know if anybody had a chance to take a look at it, but if you had any comments that you wanted to take forward for consideration as part of the feedback, we can gather those and then bring those forward. Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
So I had a chance to review it and I was looking over it and I wasn't quite clear. Was there no, it says now every 3 years this report will be required. Was there no additional report required prior to, like just the sign off?
So
like you had your original and that was it? Sorry.
These are discussions that we had with respect to the types of reports and the frequency of them and what was currently in practice. But I'll let the director answer. Yeah, whoever, yeah, for sure. It's just better coming from someone in operations.
Cassandra, how about you take a shot at it in terms of what preceded it?
So there was an annual declaration. So you would have we referred to it as a criminal reference check and not a vulnerable sector. And then it was an annual declaration. Given some of the close contact we'll be having with students, that process has been revised. And so we're moving to be compliant with other school boards and in province, so that it is after 3 years that there's the requirement to just make sure that it's up to date, so that there's oversight, and really ultimately the protection of our students and your children. So.
No, I was going to say that there's a variety of approach to it from different boards. Some are 4 years, some are 5 years, some are silent on it. But regardless, every year there has to be a declaration. So the board felt that the 3 years would be a reasonable doing. You don't want to create a barrier either, right, for parents. And so that you got to strike that balance of safety and also accommodation. So I think it's good.
And we did have some situations where, again, while there was an annual declaration, there was some police checked, reference check, whatever they were called at the time, that were when their kids had first entered school, and not from any, not for any ill intent, but they had been sitting there for a very long time, and then you just signed the declaration because there was nothing to report. So this is just an added measure to ensure that at least we know that every 3 years there is a revised or an updated check, if you will. And the vulnerable sector screening, you'll see there's wording in there where the criminal reference check was removed and the vulnerable sector screening is there, because that also, when you get a vulnerable sector screening, the report that comes back will include items that would also be on the criminal reference check. So it's a more all-encompassing report. And so there was not really a need to have both when the vulnerable sector screening would pick up on everything.
And sorry. Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm happy to see the 3 years. Like, I think it's doing due diligence. And I was wondering, where did the 3 years kind of come from? Was there a year standard before? But like, I encourage the more often that's being checked, because anybody can sign a declaration, unfortunately. It's nice to have that physical backing to it. And I'm forgetting my other question, so come.
Maria, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple of questions and some comments. So if I go too long, I can go back in the queue if someone else has something. Just further to that, the new requirement to do every 3 years. And I agree with that. And I always found it too when I would do my annual declaration every year. I always like the part that said, if you need more room, attach a sheet of paper, right? But, obviously people can lie on there as has been pointed out. And I think one way that could be further strengthened that I don't think adds barriers is to say, and I don't think it says this right now, so it's been a while for me, but to say, you sign your declaration, there's been nothing new since your original VSC, but if something comes up in the next year that you're required to report it to the board, because you could sign that honestly today and tomorrow be convicted or charged or whatever, right? So something that would require a volunteer, if something was to come up during that year, to report it to the board, and that there would be a consequence if they failed to do so, right? Just to make sure that you are really having fully up-to-date information. I'm an accountant, so I sort of have this very risk perspective on things.
So I'll comment on that really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think I made a note of it because I want to make sure we take all feedback back. I think the challenge with that, and again, happy to bring that feedback back, but I think you run into that same thing that we just talked about with the declaration, right? So absolutely that can be, how do we enforce that? So where we had concerns about people signing that annual declaration form and hoping that they're being truthful in what they're saying, I think the same thing would apply. So I don't think it's something that you couldn't put on there if circumstances have changed, if your status has changed. I still think we have to hope that there's an honor system in place that people would actually do that, because I don't know that they would. So just something to think about as far as that would be enforcement.
Yeah, well, I guess you could have a consequence, like if you fail to do so, you can't volunteer with HCDSB ever again, or like whatever, there could be a consequence that the board could put in place for that, because I do think it's important, right? And if someone's not being honest there, then do we want them volunteering in our schools? One quick thing, and I don't know if I missed it, but because I tried to listen to the meetings and it's kind of dizzying. So, but there was some talk of, there's a parent guardian guideline, I guess. And I think there was talk of adding it. If initially when it came up, the trustees weren't sure if the policy was going to be actioned, but if it was actioned, that they wanted to add that as a reference. And I don't see it as a reference. I don't know if that got missed or if it's a document that I'm just not recognizing. So maybe something to look at as well.
Yeah, I think we'd have to go back and look at that. There was a parent, I think it's a parent volunteer guide, right? So if that's one that would be added to that, then we could. We don't necessarily add every document that would somehow connect to it, but that might be good. And also to make sure it's aligning, right? That it's aligning. Right? So if we revise this, then you'd have to revise anything that's somehow connected with it. That might reference it, so it wouldn't contradict. You wouldn't want to have a parent guide then that says different set of years or anything else in terms of the process.
I did have more if there's no one else. And then the authority that's given to the director, and I want to be clear too, when we're talking about director in a policy, we're not talking about John Klein, we're talking about anybody that will occupy that position at some point, right? It's applied to any director, obviously. So, but is that something that other boards do, that they give a director that kind of authority to kind of like, this is our policy, but the director can so make a different decision? And is that something we see in other policies? Is that an authority that's given to a director for other policies? Because I found that surprising. And I do have some kind of thoughts on that as well, but I just wanted to clarify that first.
I do, sorry to jump in, but I do believe that's part of the Education Act. Like, I do think that we're being compliant with the Education Act. The director has a myriad of responsibility, and I believe that that's where that language would come from and support.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sounds good.
I can't speak for what other boards do. I'm trying to rack my brain for the last board I was at, but I think it's understood at that board and other boards that in the end the buck stops with the director when it comes to those decisions.
So, and I think that there had been some discussion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Director Klein, but there had been some conversation about some of these items. And I actually remember asking if you were okay, if not you, but if the director was okay being the one that would be a part of that, because I was worried about time and capacity. But there, in that policy, there's a mechanism, and it came out of conversations at the table around, so if something comes back on the VSC, it's, if anyone that's not familiar with it, it captures everything. And so there had been a lot of conversation at the table about, and I'm not going to grab the best example, but what if it came back that someone had had a DUI when they were 18 years old? Obviously we don't want to have that individual transporting students, but would that preclude them from participating in in Pancake Tuesday, or would that preclude them in participating in the uniform sale? And so, I think that there was, because the piece that'll have to come through procedurally will be when someone does hand in a VSC and it does have something on it, because it might, is that, and, does that particular offense or that particular conviction, what kind of bearing would that have on their ability to volunteer in the school as far as what the role is? And I know that there was some language that was put in there about the types of offenses that would cover. So I think the idea behind it is that there's a mechanism in the event that does come back, that if someone is denied access to be a volunteer, that they have a way to appeal that, and it would be up to the director to make the decision on whether or not that person could participate as a volunteer if something did come back on their sector screening. So anyways, yeah.
Yeah, so I heard a lot of those discussions, and my thoughts were going as I was listening to those discussions. And I guess what I would say is, and I heard that DUI example quite a bit. And I guess what I would say to that is, like, sure, that's doesn't impact handing out pizza, but they're still probably driving onto the parking lot to get there to volunteer, and shows poor judgment. My understanding, if something happened a long time ago, it can be pardoned. Sometimes, I don't know all the details, but things fall off after a while, etc. So there are those provisions. Again, just thinking about risk, I guess I would say, like, why not just have it, if something shows up, you can't volunteer, because to me, it puts the board at risk, and puts the director potentially at risk. And I don't think someone can take legal action against the board for not being allowed to volunteer, but they certainly could take legal action if something happens to their child as a result of somebody who maybe had a record and was allowed to volunteer, even though it showed up on the vulnerable sector check. So I guess I would just, that's kind of my feedback that I want. I think it's risky, and I just, like, why not? Something shows up, you can't volunteer, right? And I heard some of the discussion about the human rights code, but my understanding is that was particular to employment. And that kind of makes sense to me, right? Because it's a human right to be able to provide food, to eat and provide shelter, which is hard to do if you're not employed. Whereas volunteering's not. I don't think that's a human right or a legal right or whatever. So that's kind of my cautionary feedback that I would bring back from, I think it's putting the board at risk. I think it would be much cleaner. And there was some talk too, because originally there was an amendment that would give principals authority, right, to ask for an additional vulnerable checkup. And the feedback from legal was that, that could be seen as discriminatory, right? If a principal asks one person, but they don't ask another. I see this as the same way. If the director excuses one person that has a vulnerable sector check, that something comes up, but they don't excuse the other person, to me, that's also could be seen as discriminatory. So I feel like it creates legal risk for the board. That's my feedback.
I don't know if you want to speak.
No, I do appreciate that, Maria, that you're thinking of me and my role as director or whoever comes after me, whether that's this evening or tomorrow or it's good to know you're in my corner. Fortunately, I don't anticipate it being as maybe frequent as people do imagine, knock wood. My experience as a superintendent for 7 years and volunteers that was one of my areas that I had it as policy. I don't recall any at that where this occurred at that board. And as far as I know, it's been very, very rare. So it wouldn't be one where I think I'd be burning the midnight oil or inundated with these, knock wood. I think part of this too is, you're right, people don't have a right to volunteer. But I do think that people, there is a certain element of mercy that is important and inherent to our faith and to our school system. And I think one of the reasons that I've been selected is do have a modicum of good judgment, and I think that I would never put anybody at risk. I also think people kind of self-censor as well. Just imagining if I had, a criminal record, I'm guessing I wouldn't be volunteering. But it's always possible, right? That you could do that. But I'm guessing 99% of the people who have a criminal record, and particularly if they've forgotten it and it comes back on that, maybe, which says something about their life, if I forgot I was convicted of something. You would probably still then not, go through with the rest of it. But if you did and you felt it was something that, was no longer connected to it, then I think I'd be happy to look at that and consider that. And I think, it is one we've used before, but you could think of other ones as well, where people make mistakes and people, have a record. And if there's something that we don't feel in the context of present day poses a risk that we wouldn't want to carry, then we would allow that, because the ability then to participate in your child's school life, or the life of the school, I think is also very good, very important, and very valuable. So I see an arm raised behind me.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Director Klein. I think that's a good point, but I think to Lorenko, we do not call it trustee. What do you call it? Board member? Board member Lorenko, SEAC member. I think it's a good idea. Yeah. I honestly think it's a good idea for checks and balances and accountability and transparency, that once the director has made a decision, it does come back to the board for the director to explain the bona fide reasons. And then we make a decision as a board, because I agree with Ms. Lorenko that we are on the hook. And I think everyone has a great faith in your ability to make decisions. But like you mentioned, you may not be here forever. And it might be a good idea to sort of build that check and balance in there. No, well, I will, but I just want to throw that out there, that is a concern that I'd have. I think checks and balances are important, and I think that, like I said, we have all great faith in your decisions, but I think there should be an element there. Thank you.
Great. And I think that we did discuss that. I believe that was an amendment that did not pass. So I do know that we had a fulsome discussion about that. And I think we landed where we landed after that discussion. So I appreciate your feedback, Trustee Saunders. But again, I know that was an amendment that didn't go forward. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Maria, he hasn't spoken yet. Is that okay?
Sorry, so I did look at the policy, but I'm not sure if I missed this or not. The title is volunteers in Catholic schools. Does that also extend to Catholic school board property? So like Catholic board offices, whatever other offices may be out there, and specifically to board committees, because people on board committees may or may not come into contact with kids based on events or whatever. And some board committee members may or may not be parents. It could be, we have members at large here that may not have kids in schools. So I don't know if the policy extends also to board committee members.
Speak to that.
Well, we did look at that in the sense of with school council, Catholic school councils, it does relate to that.
That's a really good point. Rick, I think about times that, CPIC or SEAC may be in a school environment. They may be participating in kindergarten night, or they may be at when we do the SEA things, or anything like that. So I think that is good feedback to inquire about what would that cover off on. Or comment?
Well, I just want to kind of follow up on Trustee Saunders' comment, and like I said, I did listen to the meetings. It was a bit dizzying. There was really a lot. I probably could talk about this for half an hour, but I'll spare you that. But I did forget about that. I know that came forward about trustees, the director bringing it to the trustees. But I do agree that I think that that's an extra level of oversight, and then it's not on one person, right? It's not on the director that made this decision. He made it, and then the trustees approved it. And I know it was voted down, but I think given the policy's gone out for feedback, I would hope that trustees would be open to hearing what the community has to say. And I think that would strengthen it actually. Like personally, I would, if I was voting, I'd say it should be clear, vulnerable sector should be clear, because you can't have things pardoned, et cetera. But if there is going to be a decision to allow somebody that doesn't have a clean record to volunteer, I do think it makes sense to go to the Board of Trustees and not be left to one individual to make that decision.
So we'll jot all the feedback down, just again, recognizing it is operational in nature as far as those decisions we made. And I think that's why I came back to the director. I don't know that a decision like that would lay with the Board of Trustees, but again, happy to take all the feedback and provide that information back as part of the gathering. Yes, Amanda, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I remembered my last one and it's quick. It was back to the whole timeline thing. And do we know what the Halton District School Board does? Do they have a timeline as well?
Don't know, John.
Does anybody know? The reason I'm asking is because when I was reading through it, I was thinking about, the $30 charge, and I wondered if there was any kind of funding for low-income families that maybe if they needed support in paying for the fee for that. And then also further in my spinning of my brain was, has anyone thought to approach Halton Police Services and say, this is all automated now. This is all a computer doing it. It's emailed documents. Can we talk about maybe for the school boards, not charging parents that fee?
I can't answer about the public board. I can answer that principals do have the ability when they are not confronted with, but when they become aware of a situation where, look, I want to volunteer. This is a pain. It's going to cost this much money. Is there any? That is not going to be a problem, right? We did contact police services and learned that something that we used to be able to do years ago, I know in Waterloo it was the same, you'd have a cover letter and you just hand it out to the volunteer, they would go off and you would get either it would drastically reduced, right? Like $5-10 or something like that. They don't do that anymore. So it's the full 30, right? So $30, which is an issue, right? For some parents and some people. So those are two things I think would sort of answer the two questions that you had.
And the charge doesn't come from us.
I know that. I know it. That's why I said Halton Police Services, like someone should approach them, but I did.
Taken. Thank you, Director Klein, for we never want to have a barrier for anyone to participate. So if we can remove that barrier, I think the board will always endeavor to do that. Is there any?
Sorry, just a comment, if I may, Madam Chair. I know that there was some research into other boards, right? That was brought to the table, and it was just like discussed about what other boards do, because we were curious as trustees as well. Just to follow suit. Sorry, just a quick.
Sorry, we are moving on to item 7, which is 7.1. So the 2023-2024 SEAC agenda, for people who have been on SEAC before, you'll know that this is sort of a practice that we go through. This will have been in your package if everybody has it. But it's essentially, we kind of lay out what is going to hopefully happen at each meeting. Sometimes we do have changes to it. Yeah, thank you, Margaret. It's up on the screen there. So there are certain things that we have to put in there. So when we do our budget presentation or Spirit of Inclusion Awards, things like that, they're slotted in where they're always slotted in. And we kind of work from there. So I just want to make sure that I don't, you guys good? I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So, so you'll see that we have the September meeting there. Everything has been slotted in for that. And then we do have, so you'll see again, what has been highlighted are items that are always on our plan. And then the rest of the things that we fill in are usually predicated on feedback that comes from our SEAC committee. So last year we did have some stuff with the multi-year strategic planning that sort of went in there. But it really is, and we've had these conversations, I think previously, is really up to what you guys would like to see. So what does the committee want to see as far as presentations or guest speakers or, things that'll help us reach our goals. So you'll see that, there is some spaces on some of our months to have some of those. Now, some will be driven out of need. We may all of a sudden have staff that come to us like this evening that say we need to present the results of XYZ, or we need to, talk to SEAC about whatever that might be, and we'll slot those in there. But, if you're interested in learning about more, either for yourself, because you think the committee will benefit from it, or it's information you want to bring back to your communities, please let us know. We take that feedback, we take those ideas. We need a little bit of time to give staff enough time that they have to prepare for those presentations. But please take a look at this. I really encourage you to spend some time to take a look, think back on some of the discussions we've had about priorities and things that we want to learn more about, or any initiatives that we want to see come forward, and then send them in so that we can continue to populate this calendar with information and content that is important to the SEAC committee. I'm happy, if there's things that are percolating right now, because you'll see that we do, that we like to sort of plan a few months in advance. So if there's anything that you'd like to see us, take note of now that we can look to include at some point, great. If there isn't, please send an email with that feedback, okay? Anybody have anything now that they'd like to suggest that we take a look at or prep on, or, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. I just, going off of the presentation that we just had and noting some of the data that came back about secondary students in particular and mental health as a disability, I would like to see a presentation on education for more supports for mental health at that age level particularly. Thank you.
That people can think of right now? And if not, like I said, you can certainly send that in. Okay. Is there any questions at all about the calendar of events? What's laid out, what's there? It also gives you an idea too for your own planning, if you know something's coming up or there's something that you're interested in, learning more about as well. Yeah, Maria?
Just one question. For September, it talks about some committees and such, but I don't see that actually on our September agenda. So is that just a bit confused about that?
So my understanding is that it's not there because there haven't been any committee meetings at this point that I know of. Any subcommittee meetings? Have there been? We haven't had a bowling intervention.
Oh, I don't know. I just thought it was about asking members to participate in committees, right? Like asking for volunteers, because it talks about the code of conduct. So ask members to start a subcommittee to review and update. So
the code of conduct.
Yeah, and then it says CX subcommittees and board committees. So I thought it was
so we
just
we
asking
have
for volunteers. Yeah.
So we do have another item coming up where I'll address the piece about the subcommittee for.
I just don't see it. Sorry.
It's right here. It's on our agenda. It's item number 8, board committee updates from SEAC representatives. Sorry, that comes from your community that they want to learn more about. I know we always get a lot of questions about EA allocations or IEPs and things like that. So please bring those forward. Okay, so moving on to item number 8, which is board committee updates from SEAC representatives. Normally we would have these listed. So we would have the de-streaming committee, we would have the bullying intervention committee, any of the committees that we currently have representation on, we would have those listed with the applicable SEAC member's name beside it so that they can present any updates from that meeting, but we haven't had any of those meetings to date, so we haven't for this school year, so we don't have them there. We will also endeavor to bring forward to SEAC committee members if there's been a new committee form that we need representation for. If we've had a change in the representation, we'll bring that to you and say, like, we need someone to represent SEAC on, equity and inclusion or whatever that might be, and then we open that up to anyone that's interested in that. So part of that is that the SEAC Code of Conduct, it's been a few years. So this is not a board committee. This would be a SEAC committee, but when we're talking about committees, this is something that was formed a couple of years ago. There was a committee that came together. They put together this SEAC Code of Conduct. We've had it now for a couple of years. There was some discussion last year about some of the content, and there was some question around some of the wording and things like that. So we thought it might be a good idea to form a committee again to go through the current code of conduct or the guide that we have, take a look at what we currently have. Do we need to do any work on that, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were thinking about having, again, creating a subcommittee to review that. We'll put that out in an email, but if anybody's interested in that, I just wanted to bring that forward tonight as a consideration as well. Okay, so if you're interested in being on that subcommittee, we'll send out details and you can let us know if it's something that you'd like to participate in. Is there any questions at all on board committees? No? Okay. Yes, of course.
Sorry to interrupt. We did have a subcommittee meeting for the regional arts specialized program.
Okay,
and I participated on that last week.
Okay,
so
great.
I don't know if I am to report back.
Go ahead. Yes.
I knew. Just let me know.
Absolutely, yeah.
I wasn't sure if we were creating the agenda or adding that in, but I do have minutes from that meeting and I can share them either electronically or.
No, I would love that. If you have them there and you want to share them, that would be fantastic.
Okay, so yeah. I can do that right now or I can send an email, whatever.
No, go ahead.
Suits.
We can follow up after with details of that.
Sure.
So people can have it because it wasn't in the agenda package.
It's not, yes.
But go ahead. No, speak to it for sure.
So just quickly, I just volunteered as a SEAC member to be on the regional arts program subcommittee that just got formed, and we had our very first meeting. There was a push for the meeting to happen in June last year, but we deferred it to September. So just did the first meeting and had an introductory kind of first steps, information gathering. And there's a slide deck here that supports some of the things that it was kind of a brain dump, I think, of everyone who participated. So there will be quite a few next steps coming out of that meeting, and I can share that with everyone at a later date. But just to let you know that that happened and I participated on our behalf, and thanks.
Yeah, Marie?
I just remembered, did we have any representation on the uniform committee? Because I believe they met throughout the summer, so.
I don't know. John can speak to it. I was not here when that was formed, so I don't know. John, do you know?
I think the question was what status of that uniform committee?
Well, I guess I'm wondering, did we have any representation from SEAC? And
go forward.
Is there an update on that?
Maria, were you not on it? Okay, well, let me look into that. I thought you were. Sorry?
Yeah, with the. Right.
Okay, so it's on pause for now. I do know it's on pause. I think they tried to get some of the meetings done through the summer. And part of the problem was that's really not a great time to start getting meetings organized is through the summer because people are off on everything. So I think that's a stay tuned and we'll find out where the next step is.
Are you saying you want me on it?
No comment, Maria.
Actually, one of the reasons I didn't put my name forward was I was on holidays when the critical dates were happening. So.
So what we can do is when that is unpaused, and if that process is moving forward, then again, we will put that out for anyone that's interested in being on the committee. And I think it's, it'll be important for us, again, as we move forward, I don't know how well we've done it in the past, but to explain what the commitments look like, what the frequency of meetings looks like, what that kind of thing. Because I think everybody has the best of intentions in participating, and all of a sudden you find out it's 2 meetings a month, or you need full days for things. So we'll always make sure that we outline what that participation looks like as well. So again, if we unpause, we'll make sure that we bring that to the committee for anyone that's interested. Okay, so moving on to item number 9, which is communication to SEAC 9.1. We do have the superintendent report.
All right, I'm just looking at the time. So I'm going to go over a few updates from the department, but I wanted to extend some gratitude in the very warm welcome that I've received as being part of this team and a member of the board. And I know that Brenda already introduced Margaret, but she is my right-hand gal and very fortunate to have her to work with as well. And, being our first SEAC meeting together, we thank you in advance for your patience and understanding as we understand the culture and the norms of SEAC. This year, we also welcome back Patricia Codner. She's the chief social worker. She was on secondment, so we borrowed her back, and you'll be happy to know she was doing some work with School Mental Health Ontario. So we are very rich in some knowledge around some supports in that area, and very much looking forward to collaborating with her this year. We did have a successful startup. The central staff really worked hard to make sure that students were well supported, that the start of the school year was a smooth transition. I'm very appreciative of all the work that did go into that, bulk of it happening before I assumed the role of superintendent, and just in awe and appreciation of all the work that did go into making sure that students were well supported for startup. We continue to receive updates and respond to needs in the school in intentional and meaningful ways as far as staffing is concerned. And we thank you for your patience and understanding around that. We have done some hiring as well. And we've got some Empower training. We had an expansion of the CLC at St. Teresa. And we also have some really important information data coming from research on some math interventions that we think will also help and inform our work as a department. So once we have some of those results, we'll be happy to share that with you as well. I know as we're looking at the agenda and some potential items for discussion, I think that might be something we might be interested in hearing about, and just better understanding what the results are telling us. This month, we communicated recognition of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, the Awareness Day on September 8th. We also sent out some information around the IEP and the parent consultation timelines. So for many students with diverse needs, they would have an IEP, and that process of getting parent input is very important and valuable to programming. And then we have some cross-country dates coming up, October 17th, 18th, and 19th. It will be an inclusive event, and that will be taking place at Kelso Park. And the communication will go out, if you haven't already received it, it went out, I think, last week, just identifying the regions. So the 17th, I don't remember if that's the Milton Day. So each family of schools will have an opportunity to participate. So those details should hopefully have reached to you as well. As far as living our faith, we did receive some updates from the parish of Mary Mother of God in Oakville that every third Sunday, starting September the 10th, every second Sunday of the month, 3 p.m., it's getting late, that they will have a sensory-friendly mass for all who would require. And it's open to not just the parishioners of Mary Mother of God, Oakville, but to anyone who would want to access Mass. Lower lighting, less unanticipated components of the Mass, and amazing. So hopefully if you haven't received that information, that you're receiving it now. There was a flyer that went out with it as well that we can attach to the minutes. We also are in collaboration with our Human Rights and Equity Department working on a Use Kind Words campaign where we're really trying to eradicate bullying, but really identify that our the language that we're using to promote positive messaging and that everyone is feeling inclusive. So the Use Kind Words campaign is in development and we're really proud of this collaboration. We welcomed the third cohort of Project Search for students for the 23-24 school year. And our Halton Catholic interns have begun their Project Search journey with orientation, training activities, and tours of various departments within the Milton District Hospital in preparation for their upcoming internships. We do have job launch returning. So last year it was met with quite a success. And so this is a 6-week pre-employment program facilitated by Explorer Employment, and it will continue to support students in secondary life skills classes. And it's already begun on some sites as recently as September 18th. And we're very thankful to the community partner, Community Living Oakville, and the Ontario Trillium Foundation for their support with this initiative. As of September 11th, we had some training for itinerant Empower teachers, and that's part of our literacy intervention. And some of the topics that were addressed included training on standardized tests that will be used as pre and post test measures to determine gains, updated consent forms for service, and finalizing schedules and groupings within all of our schools. And we do have some new special education resource teachers that were hired, and that CLC was held on September the 15th, covering topics around eLight, which is the software that we use to develop the IEP and communicate IPRC information, and our SEA platforms, and the IEP parent consultation process. So again, that is a very important component to developing the IEP. It is a working document, but getting the feedback from parents is really integral to the success of that partnership. We have some EA updates. So members of our IEA, so our itinerant educator, getting tongue-tied, IEA and CYC teams participated in some summer writing together, so a joint effort, and there were 2 projects that were rolled out, one for calming strategies for students with disabilities, and a second one, a template for school-based staff to respond to incidents, so that we're responding to incidents in dignified and compassionate ways, and just using a framework to help guide in those situations. We're happy to announce the Camp Unity that happened in July at St. Anne's School. Students from HCDSB participated both as campers and as leaders. The camp was run on an in-kind model through the Halton FASD Collaborative. And new this year, all classroom teachers who have a student using augmentative and alternative communication will be invited to a half day of training. I have to say that some of that training began last week and it was really well received. So there's a lot of engagement, a lot of commitment on the department to support students who do require that assistance, and equally important is the response of staff, and that's been overwhelmingly positive. So I'm looking over at Denise Coley over there. And our DHH, so Deaf Hard of Hearing ICERTs, will also be running training for teachers this week on how to support students who are deaf and hard of hearing. And the speech and language department will also be training educators this month in supporting implementations of Stay, Play, and Talk in 10 classrooms over the fall, which is a kindergarten program that uses peer-mediated prompting to support social communication and inclusion. Our psych department has shared that over the summer, 29 contractor and 14 internal psychoeducational assessments were completed, which is amazing. That gives us those profiles so that we know how to plan and program for our students, and to ensure that there's supports. And then we do have a lot of updates from our mental health and CYC department. So social workers and CYC supported 42 students and families this summer and their transition back to school in September. A huge thank you to our social workers and our child youth counselors who volunteered to work this summer. The mental health landing page was also revised to update and reflect how Halton Catholic District School Board is supporting students' mental health and well-being. I have to say that that landing page is phenomenal. There's so many resources. There's a parent portal, access for students, really high quality, and a lot of content that in your spare time you might want to take a look at and review. Sincere thanks to Rob DeFranco and Communications, who brought the vision to life. And now parents and caregivers can also access how we provide mental health services. And there's reference to the tiered model of intervention through the website as well. And there's information about the community agencies that we collaborate with also on the landing page. There's information for parents and caregivers to access crisis support and information on crisis support. And it also includes our mental health strategy, newly revised and posted. There are a number of mental health resources printed for all schools to support social emotional learning, coping strategies, and visuals. They're great. They're through Canva. I'm not sure if you've heard of Canva. They do these graphic visuals, and they really are. I have a couple in my office to just remind me about staying centered and to in moments that maybe emotions are heightened, to really reflect. And so every school received some of those. And then we have some mental health literacy lessons that have been piloted. So last year in 4 elementary schools from grades 1 to 8, and this year they are going to be mandated to deliver 3 mental health literacy modules in both grades 7 and 8. So that is, I think, in its final stages, and more information will be forthcoming. So something to look out for students, for parents who have students in those grades. Students in grades 1 to 6 will receive 2 mental health literacy lessons. Again, more information to come. And all grade 9 students are receiving 4 mental literacy lessons embedded in their religion courses as per last year. We've also trained additional assist trainers and now have a total of 4 who can offer more trainings and increase system capacity. And we've been also trained 2 additional Safe Talk trainers, and they're offered monthly trainings from October to May for all staff. So these are some interventions to help, again, with situations of crisis, supporting mental health. I have some coordinator updates. So Jody, of course, is our coordinator. She's here for a short time, but a good time. And the joke never gets stale. I don't know. Anyway, so we had our first secondary special education department head meeting on Tuesday, September the 19th, and topics included a presentation on ChatGPT with curriculum services, BOCFIT, and a presentation by our EA managers on IRPs, SE17, safety plans, and collaborating with EAs. On the PA day, the department on September 5th, we focused on mental health supports in schools and took a look at literacy here at the board. And the afternoon was spent in department meetings and in schools supporting staff to prepare for the first day of school. I mentioned Empower training had taken place, so 9 certs in total were trained by staff from SEAC Kids in Empower on September 12th and 13th at the board office, and special education summer learning supports. We were able to see firsthand what some of those summer supports were. But this year, CERT supported all the summer programs throughout the month of July, including Camp Summerland for students in grades 2 to 5, the grade 6 to 8 literacy numeracy program, as well as the high school credit earning courses. We also ran our special education learning program for students in grades 5 to 12 to support students on A4 and modified programming. So kind of sped through some of those details, but I wanted to capture all that is being done. I'll be more brief going forward, but just really excited to be part of the team and all the work that is happening. And again, looking for your feedback to help guide what our system needs and what you need, and how we can ensure that our students are feeling welcomed and safe and secure, and that they know that they are loved and they are capable. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The more information that this committee gets, the better. So never worry about having a long superintendent report. We embrace that. The one thing that I do, I feel very honored and grateful to be a part of this committee for a number of different reasons, but one of them is because we do receive so much information. And Maria and I have been around for a bit, and we would find mechanisms to be able to communicate some of this information out to our parents and our stakeholders, and that was done via SEAC sound bites, which we don't do anymore because we don't have the capacity and we need someone else to take the torch and do them because it was a lot of work. But my point in all of that is that, are there ways for us to capture some of these snippets? Not everybody's on Twitter, not everybody's. I think it would be great if we were able to communicate some of the elements out of these this sharing so that people knew what was coming up, what was going on, that kind of thing. So just something for you to ruminate on is, maybe a way that we can capture this. I don't know if we need to go back to looking at a SEAC newsletter once a quarter or something. Maybe once a quarter is more doable. But I do think in the effort of engagement and sharing, there's just a lot of stuff there that parents may not be aware of. And I think it's important we talk about the stuff that's happening more often in SEAC, or sorry,
Spec Ed. You're absolutely right. I had, I've been on the job 2 months, but I did have some ideas around how we can really make sure that we're known for the work that we're doing. I feel like there is a high standard of not only quality of instruction and supports, but expectations of the students, because we know they are all capable. But yeah, I know Twitter has gone to X, the world of X, but that the idea of having a newsletter, I know some schools have gone from the monthly newsletter to the weekly, so it's just in terms of syncing it up. But you're reading my thoughts that are
and I know that we do have, our website is quite fulsome. We do put a lot of stuff on there, but again, I think we're leaving it up to the parents to sometimes search through that. And so if we just had a better way to push the info out. So thank you so much for that. And then just one other comment was to just make sure that we get invites out to all of the SEAC members for the cross country. Yes, just so that people can get it in their calendars. Again, we always encourage SEAC members, if you can, please come out to the events. They are very bucket filling, and they're great to witness and be a part of. And so just to get that, so anyone that can participate. Is there any questions at all on the superintendent's report? Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
I just had a quick question on sharing information back to our organizations. And in terms of this agenda and this report, is it shareable in sound bites, or is it considered confidential, not to be shared? I've never shared anything verbatim, more of general, but is that a report that I could share relevant parts back to the organization?
Yeah. So the minutes, everything will be captured on our website, and it's accessible. So you can certainly, Margaret's going to be uninterrupted, and she's going to have time tomorrow morning to get that up there. But it might, like I said, it was an abundance of information, so I might just, I might edit it down to just some highlights, but yeah.
And the agenda package is on there as well, Mandy, so please feel free to communicate that out for sure.
Yeah, not a question, but just a comment. I wanted to say that I was really pleased to see the report in the a written copy. Not only that we had it in advance, but that there was a written copy that we could review beforehand and be able to reference afterwards. Because it is always, there's so much that the superintendent always shares, and I'm sure I miss half of it. I used to try and take notes, and we haven't had it like this before, so I'm really appreciative of that. And so, that's a good start too, right? To sharing that information, that it is there, it's on the website, that anybody can access. So I think that's a great start. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was trying to organize it, cluster the information in some emerging themes. So take feedback on if it works. If not, I am adaptable.
Thank you very much. We now have the trustee report. So Trustee Powell.
I have a very minuscule amount of information. So we balance out tonight. We just had our first regular board meeting on September 5th, and we had a couple of presentations. There was a summer school update that was pretty cool. There were almost 5,500 kids that went through their summer school program, including 233 who took ESL. September 12th, we had our first policy meeting. It was pretty uneventful. And our second board meeting was September 19th. We had a couple presentations. We had CPIC, we had the multi-year strategic plan that we been a part of here at SEAC. And the graduation coach program for Black students, there was an update that they've, actually it was a really, really thorough update and really encouraging to hear. And they've been supporting over 80 students at St. Francis Xavier. So I know there's a request to expand it, but I don't know when that's going to happen. But yeah, so it's been pretty low key, I guess. I don't want to say low key, but we're just getting into it. The volunteer obviously has come back, but yeah, we don't really have too much going on that would pertain to SEAC too much, and I'll keep you posted.
Is there any questions at all for Trustee Powell? Maria?
Just a quick one. Did you say there was a CPIC presentation at the last board meeting, or did I misunderstand that?
It was actually Superintendent Denolfo just kind of gave an update. Sorry, I shouldn't say it was a presentation in our agenda package. It was, yeah. You're like, did I miss?
Okay. Any other questions for Trustee Powell? No. Okay, moving on to, thank you very much to both of you. Moving on to item 9.3 is the motion to include Brianna Hamlet as Autism Ontario's representative. So I will, I'm going to read the motion that passed and then pass it over to you to introduce yourself and all that good stuff. So at our meeting, there was happened in camera. We did have a motion. So I'll read it. Resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board appoint Autism Ontario and their representative, Brianna Hamlet, to the Special Education Advisory Committee, SEAC, of the Halton Catholic District School Board for the period of September 2023 to November 2026. And again, it did pass unanimously. I think I said earlier, we're really excited to have a representative from Autism Ontario again at our table, especially given some of the information we know about the prevalence of students with autism in our school communities. So welcome, Brianna. Sorry about the hiccups earlier. It happens, we're all human, but we're happy to have you here. And please, if you want to take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, and that'd be great.
Thank you so much. So my boys go to Assumption High School. They're in grade 10 and 11. My son takes a service dog to school as well. So he's an autism assistance dog and a seizure response that goes to school every day with him. So he's also a student of Assumption. He's in the yearbook and everything. So, but I've been a really big advocate since my son was 2.5 years old and diagnosed. I organized the first Halton Walk in Burlington and did that for a few years. I stopped when COVID hit. My family's been documented by Samsung and how children with disabilities, how they can use technology to incorporate their day, whether that be at home and in school, and what does that look like. We just did a documentary with Sick Kids and Autism Speaks Canada. We were chosen out of 5 families across Canada to participate in their documentary too on what does that look like living with autism and how do we access our world. So I'm pretty well versed in autism. My other son has a learning disability as well. He has Asperger's and he has ADHD, both of them. So I kind of comorbid going on there, but so I have a lot of experience, and I've supported a lot of my parents in my school. Unofficially, the principal would give me, say, hey, we have, like, sometimes parents just don't understand or just overwhelmed with how the process works. So I've really been an ear and guiding parents for a while now. So this is just, I think, a natural progression for me to join this board. I've been pushed by my principals for many years, asked me, why am I not on this board? So opportunity, my boys are doing really well and successful. So that opened me up to not so much having to take care of them as much anymore, which is a role I'm getting used to, having to let go. So I decided to be part of this board.
Thank you, Brianna. Welcome. We're again very, very happy to have that voice, the participation, and the ability to go back and forth with the autism community with things that are going on. So again, welcome. Happy to have you, and feel free to jump on any committee that you like, because we like fresh eyes and we like fresh people who have lots of energy that are ready to jump in. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Brianna before we move forward? No? Okay, great. So moving on to item number 10, which is our SEAC discussion item / questions. Is there any SEAC items or questions anyone wants to bring forward this evening? Okay. So meeting summary and next steps. So we're going to send out some invitations for the event that's coming up. There's a couple other Margaret's like, yeah. There's a couple of other pieces that we're going to follow up with. Thank you again for your feedback. We'll collate that and make sure that that's provided. So a couple of things for us to follow up on. Our next meeting is Monday, October the 30th. Maybe we'll try to have some treats here that night. Thank you as well for the coffee and the treats that were here this evening. That's always a nice bonus. Resolution for absenteeism. So we did receive regrets from Jessica Lim and Emma Murphy. Did we receive any other, Margaret, do you know? No. Okay. So I do need a motion for resolution for absenteeism for those two SEAC members. If I could have someone pass that, Maria, move it. Do you have a seconder for Trish? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and now we move on to adjournment and closing prayers. So can I get a motion to adjourn? Maria? And seconded? Tracy, okay, thank you. I know, I get it. Okay, if you will join me in the sign of our faith, we'll go into our closing prayers. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Blessed are you, O God of all creation. Each day you spread before us the rich and wonderful diversity of the human family created in the divine splendor of your love. Fashioned in your image, you call us to love one another with the same tender care with which you brought us to creation. Each one of us is but one small part of the glory that is you. As we serve the students and families of the Halton Catholic District School Board on the Special Education Advisory Committee, fill us with your grace, guide us with your wisdom, and give us the strength and courage to do your work, so that it may always be said over every act, God saw that it was good. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Thanks you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.